At the same time, there are differences between both SIFTA and the Program of Action, and it's important to recognize that both need to be fully implemented in order to deal with the wide range of small arms issues that challenge Caribbean and other regions. These include, in the Program of Action, stockpiling regulations, destruction of seized and surplus weapons, and importantly, public awareness programs around issues of small arms. So thus, although SIFTA is an important firearms convention in its own right, it does fall short of responding to the full range of small arms concerns, and it's important that the UN Program of Action aspects also be addressed. The third existing instrument is the UN Register of Conventional Arms. It's a very important transparency mechanism around conventional arms, and it has become more relevant in recent years to CARICOM states because as of 2003, the UN has been encouraging states to report transfers of small arms and light weapons, in addition to the 7 categories of major weapons. Previous to this, because they were major conventional weapons systems, they weren't particularly relevant to the Caribbean region because most states did not have or certainly did not import or export those kinds of major systems. But more recently, because of the inclusion of small arms and light weapons, the register has become an important instrument of transparency. And indeed, a number of CARICOM states have reported small arms and light weapons transfers to the UN register. As early as 1992 and 93, the first years of the UN register, Jamaica reported small arms and light weapons transfers, although it did not include small arms for the Jamaica Defense Force. It did have some statistics there. The greatest number of small arms and light weapons reports to the register by 3 CARICOM states occurred during 2006, and I think there's prospects of even greater participation. So this is an important transparency instrument that could assist CARICOM states to share data on transfers of small arms and light weapons and to build regional capacity in monitoring the flows within and out of and into the region. Turning now to the 2 initiatives, the Geneva Declaration on Armed Violence and Development came out of a 2006 meeting hosted by the Swiss government and the United Nations Development Program, and had 42 countries sign on immediately. Since then, over 100 countries have participated or have signed the declaration, which is aimed at placing security and armed violence reduction alongside Millennium Development Goals, recognizing that security is another important pillar of international development. The Geneva Declaration can be seen as a link between the UN Program of Action and the Millennium Development Goals, and it certainly responds to the fact that the Program of Action on small arms does not adequately address development impacts of small arms. To date, Jamaica and Guyana are the sole CARICOM states that have signed the Geneva Declaration. However, interestingly, Jamaica is one of 3 focus countries for the declaration, along with Guatemala and Burundi. And this is where the focus countries have volunteered for testing of concrete programs and projects aimed at reducing armed violence in favor of development. And experiences made in these focus countries will provide ideas and initiatives to be taken on the ground by other countries and international organizations in support of the objectives of the Geneva Declaration. So it's important that Jamaica is participating in that as a focus country. There is, in fact, at the moment, or as of the end of May, the Secretary General called for state submissions on links between armed violence and development We don't have an indication yet of which states have participated in that, but we hope certainly that there are some CARICOM states that have made submissions to the UN Secretary General. The final initiative I want to mention is the International Arms Trade Treaty, which could become the most important conventional arms control initiative of the 21st century if it is put together effectively. All CARICOM member states voted yes to the 2006 General Assembly resolution towards an arms trade treaty. And a UN process is now underway that would establish universal standards for authorizing conventional arms transfers, and in particular transfers of small arms and light weapons. An effective arms trade treaty would rein in irresponsible weapons transfers that currently feed criminality, human rights violations, and breaches of international humanitarian law, and other aspects of irresponsible trade. But to be effective, the scope of the treaty would need to be broad and certainly include small arms and light weapons. The process towards an arms trade treaty has established an open-ended working group, which is now meeting, has had one meeting so far this year, in which actually Anthony participated. And it is working towards formulating the key components of the arms trade treaty. It is an opportunity, in my view, to ensure that Caribbean interests in the strict control of small arms and light weapons are reflected in a major treaty. And so it is important that Caribbean states participate in the open-ended working group process. It will help to, the arms trade treaty itself will help to reinforce harmonization of laws and practices, and could provide important opportunities for technical and other assistance around these issues. I want to conclude by suggesting that CARICOM states can draw on these UN instruments to form a regional approach to the issue of small arms and light weapons that reflects regional interests and dynamics. The region has unique characteristics and requirements that need to be factored into implementation of any of these measures. For example, the UN Register was of no great significance to the Caribbean region while it recorded transfers of the 7 major conventional weapons categories, but its more recent expansion to encourage reporting of transfers of small arms makes it far more relevant to the kinds of weapons moving in and around the Caribbean region. Similarly, because CARICOM states do not manufacture firearms, the firearms protocol provisions dealing with illicit trafficking are far more important and relevant to the Caribbean experience. In my view, there's much to commend a regional approach to small arms and light weapons that would build on these UN instruments and initiatives. If in particular CARICOM pursued a binding regional agreement as called for by the UN Program of Action, it would provide an opportunity to adopt a truly regional approach to the proliferation and misuse of small arms. And it would potentially surpass the weaknesses of the UN instruments. A CARICOM agreement could also draw on the OAS and other regional small arms agreements, several of which have already shaped some of the UN instruments. As small states, CARICOM members and other Caribbean states share common challenges that arise from the circulation of small arms that they do not themselves produce. They have an opportunity to collaborate on a tailored regional agreement that amalgamates existing commitments to UN instruments and initiatives and draws on other regional experience. In this manner, Caribbean states could shape a Caribbean response to a Caribbean challenge. Thank you.